Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm going to be doing the 14.13 support tier list here for Java content. Like, subscribe, and let's get into it. Once again, this is targeted towards just average, average mid elo, low elo tiers. Don't really want to target high elo, but kind of fills its own separate bracket, and I might make tier list next patch which kind of target towards high elo, but for the most part this is going to be very average. But I will talk about certain things which like differ to high elo to low elo. But let's get into it. So to begin with, this patch did have a couple of changes. We saw some obviously like quality of life stuff towards Pantheon, didn't really do anything. Brand got a very placebo nerf. Zac got slightly nerfed, but was also kind of placebo, didn't really do a huge amount. But there are some other things which I do want to cover and talk about. So the D tier is mostly going to consist of the same champions. We have Twitch, still massively underperforming as a support option at the moment. Just doesn't really function on the AP build that he once did. Crown obviously was one of his core items here, and losing that has just meant that he just hasn't really found traction. Obviously, if you're playing it, it's Silver Nash's Rabadons, but it still underperforms. I would recommend avoiding it. MF got buffed this patch, didn't really do anything for support MF. It's frustrating because I believe MF should have potential as a really good support option. There are really good items which synergize with her E quite nicely, but it just doesn't really translate into enough at the moment, and it would be good to see some level of buffs there to at least push it to a point where it could be considered viable. Not meta, but definitely something people can opt into. Right now, it just isn't really there. Also solidifies herself as a D tier spot. Ashe support has massively underperformed for a while. Obviously, it does still see some competitive, I believe. However, I believe that mostly has kind of faded out at this point. The champion's punished by a lot of the heavy Warmogs users at the moment, combined with a couple of nerfs towards support Ashe and just Ashe in general. She really does underperform here. She also solidifies herself as a spot in the D tier. Malphite, obviously a pretty gimmicky support option, doesn't really find a huge amount of success also here. And then Veigar and Hui are my two mage options here. Neither of them really have a huge amount of traction in the support role. Both of them are really solid APC options though. I'd definitely recommend going and playing them as like a bot option or just in the mid lane. Obviously both of them are still very viable mid laners, but they're going to be in the D tier for support options. Moving on to the C tier, so Yuumi still underperforms in the support role. They really don't want to put this champion any higher. Obviously when Yuumi becomes slightly viable for the most part, she does start seeing heavy competitive play. She is still slightly on the weaker side. Obviously, she does have synergies with like Berserk, which can definitely help. I believe Tristana and Lucian both synergize relatively nicely with this champion. Obviously, in Lucian's case, it's with the passive, and the mobility can definitely help ease up some laning phases. In Tristana's case, once again, mobility combined with some fairly easy wave clear. There's definitely benefits to that kind of synergy. Moving on, we have Swain. Swain obviously is going to get a rework at some point. This champion has been underperforming in the support role for a while. Works fine as a mid and bot option, but yeah, as a support champion, definitely just isn't finding the level of success he really needs to really have the win rate to support it. In any case, it's mostly because of his items just being a bit too expensive, and then if he ever falls behind the curve, he just gets really punished for it. Rylai tends to be his best first item. Tank variants just isn't really there either. You're mostly stuck on like Rylai Zonya, Rylai Liandry. Blackfire just isn't a great support option for him, and he sits within the C tier. And Senna obviously has been really struggling since like all the lethality options have been nerfed for her. The Yomus, the Opportunity, the the Umbral Glaive have all been nerfed for ranged champions, and Senna definitely struggling a lot more with that. Opportunity still looks to be her best first item option, and then you can go into something like an Edge, RFC, LDR. That tends to be your pretty standard core. You don't really have much variation there. In the past, we did see some like tanks variations, but as standard core at the moment, Opportunity, Edge, RFC, LDR, and still underperform, so a bit reliant on synergies. Moving on to the B tier, we have a couple of changes here. some champions moving out of the B tier, but I'll cover the champions in here first. So Karma doing a bit better nowadays with the with a couple of buffs which she's received. She got like buffed 3 or 4 patches in a row for the most part. Big amount of changes towards her E, making it a lot nicer of a spell to use, increasing the movement speed duration, increasing the shield power, just a lot of changes there, and it's finally put her in a good spot. Obviously plays as a lane bully early on into the game. You can go like 3-point Q, 5-point Q, and then play into your E max, being a bit of a shield bot later on into the game, and she's a solid B tier option. Bard, definitely a lot weaker these days than he used to be. Obviously, he still does have potential. Like, if you're good at piloting this pick, there's definitely power to be had here. Synergizes quite nicely with like a Jhin pairing, gives it a lot of range, gives him a lot of bullying power early on into the game. The map mobility is also really nice with this champion. Of course, if you're able to play the map really well, then definitely a lot of power to this pick. But he's definitely harder to pilot. The build isn't as strong, and he sits within the B tier for the moment. Nico support, not as popular as Nico has just been declining in popularity for a while, but there's still definitely strength here. Obviously the snare duration is quite long. She plays like a lane bully early on into the game. Her team fighting ultimate is a great tool. If you fall behind, once again, you are going to get punished. You don't have quite as much range as the likes of your Luxes, your Vel'Kozes, your Zerefs, stuff like that. But she definitely does have power, and she's a solid B tier option. Camille obviously got nerfed for support. She got nerfed for support when nerfed for top lane, and Bloodsong got nerfed. All these have kind of led to her being a bit weaker. Eclipse also got nerfed, and yeah, in turn, she's not as powerful as she used to be. But she's still a solid B2 option. If you can bully out enemy supports, you're running your likes of Halo Blades, and you're really just trying to be quite oppressive, invading enemy jungle, looking for ganks into mid lane, she's a good B2 option. Teemo, obviously recommended only as a counter pick, tends to be very aggressively low elo skewed. The higher up you go, the more you'll get punished for this pick. Obviously, if the enemy team doesn't opt into like control wards, sweepers, they play poorly around like your control, your blind has more value, stuff like that can really help this pick definitely thrive in the support role. But for the most part, it's kind of gimmicky and not something I'd really recommend just playing primarily as a support option, but something you can opt into if you need it. Pantheon didn't really change with the quality of life change. Obviously, if that is the point of a quality of life change, it's to help the champion feel a bit better without really giving it too much more power. And he's still a fine support option. Obviously, the changes they made to him, where they encouraged more health building, have definitely helped him. It took him from like a C tier to like a B tier option. If you pair him with the right champions, you can definitely have really like a huge amount of all-in threat early on into the game. The W and the Q provide so much damage, just harassing with Q in laning phase. You can struggle into some of the champions, which definitely like mitigate your impact. Like, he's pretty weak into a lot of the tank options, and enchanters, if you fall behind, can definitely be something you struggle into if they have self-peeling tools. Obviously, the likes of Janna, very hard for Pantheon to play that matchup. Morgana isn't doing too bad in support anymore. She was obviously pretty bad for a while, but she's definitely benefited from some of the item changes. Once again, Leandri's still a really nice item on her. She can opt into things like Rhyhorn. I don't know if Blackfire Torch is finding the same level of success on Morgana support as Morgana jungle, but I can quickly have a look. It gives a better idea. Yeah, it looks to just be primarily the Leandri. I had a feeling it was, and then like Zhonya, obviously really solid item for her. Allows her to more aggressively play as like a frontline option with that ultimate. If you can get the binding down, she's a really solid pick. And yeah, there's definitely synergies which you want to play around, whether that's like Jhin follow-up, Caitlyn follow-up, stuff like that. And yeah, good B tier pick. Pyke definitely a bit weaker at the moment. Obviously, a lot of the tankier champions definitely cause a lot of problems for him. If he's not able to burst down a target, he can have a very hard time really snowballing into a game. Tends to be a bit better into the enchanter options, and the likes of Senna, he can really abuse that matchup. But into the likes of Leona, Braum, you can really struggle in these matchups. It puts him in a bit of a weaker spot at the moment, but if you get the counter picks, then yeah, you can definitely find success on this champion. Amumu, really unpopular, but his ease of play definitely gives him some sort of merit in the bot lane. Obviously, the Warmogs can be a rush option on him. You just go into standard traditional tank, your Zeeks, your Lockets, your Knights, stuff like that. And he's a solid B2 option. Renata, also not doing too great at the moment. Tends to benefit from some of the tanky options as well. Obviously, Locket, Redemption tend to be pretty nice opt-in items on this champion. And then you're playing around synergies, making sure you can reapply your passive, getting value out of your W. And she's a solid B tier option. Very unpopular though at the moment. Alistar probably deserves a spot in the A tier at this point, honestly. He's been kind of... Okay, so the thing with Alistar is he received a bunch of changes back along, which were trying to help out his healing. Obviously, his healing was quite weak for a while, and that changed, and like some, I believe they like changed some of his mana costs so he could like rotate more combos. Definitely did help him. And yeah, I'll put him in the A tier. I'm kind of hesitant though, as Alistar's a bit more combo reliant. He's definitely a champion which is a bit harder to pull off than some of the S and the A tier options, but definitely deserves a move up. Doing a bit better in the current support climate. Galio, actually a high A tier option. So Galio also moves up from a B tier. This is also Warmogs really benefiting this champion. He was kind of struggling for like a solid first item option in support, but definitely provides him with one. He's a good A tier pick. They are nerfing Warmogs for support next patch. It's just too accessible for too many champions. It's definitely something which like supports should be able to opt into every so often. The movement speed, the health are really nice on them, but just having it as a default, not particularly healthy for the support role. And the likes of Locket and Knights are not bad items. Like, Locket is definitely something you should be going into games where you really do value the Locket, and not so much just the raw health of the Warmogs. There were like cases where into Karthus people were rushing Warmogs when Locket would have had so much more value. Moving on, we have Lulu. Lulu is still a solid A tier option. Once again, tends to be a bit reliant on pairings, making sure you can get a lot of value out of your W, and your ultimate can pair quite nicely with the likes of a Kog'Maw. However, I would recommend a Braum if you are pairing something with the Kog'Maw, but Lulu's a bit more generalistic. Shen and Tahm Kench, once again, both are very solid Heartsteel users, but can opt into Warmogs if they do want to. Gives them a lot of health. They have good health ratios. Shen on his ultimate, Tahm Kench on his passive. And yeah, these two picks are solid A tier options in the support role. Maokai, also another champion which can benefit from that. Trailblazer, also quite a nice item on Maokai. And his control with the saplings, his CC, ease of play, his valuable ultimate. Just give him a lot of good supportive tools. And he's also a good A tier pick. Vel'Koz, solid harass option in the bot lane. Definitely a good artillery mage these days. Obviously, Xerath is still my recommended go-to. But if you put the games into Vel'Koz, you can definitely find success on this pick. The true damage burst combined with some of the itemization options he has can allow him to be a bit more flexible, and he is a good A tier pick. Seraphine, definitely doing a lot better at the moment. This champion has finally found herself in a good spot for the support role. This would be items like Echoes of Helia, which she really benefits from that, combined with just standard enchanter, your moonstones, possibly your Ardents, your Staff, stuff like that, Mikhail's Redemption. There's options there for her, and she's definitely in a lot better of a spot at the moment in the support role. One of the, I mean, in recent memory, this is just the first time she has really been viable as a support, ever since she received like a couple of changes back along, which definitely kind of pushed her towards helping her in this role. Lux, solid burst mage, obviously has some level of artillery with her E and R. Long range snares, if you're ahead, can be lethal, and yeah, once again, if you snowball on this pick, you can really easily just take over games, and oftentimes one shot carries, one shot mid laners, stuff like that, which can really help. And yeah, she's a good A tier option. Rakan, a less he's not as OP as he was last split. He definitely was taking over last split for the most part. This split, kind of not finding the same level of success, but he's still a good option. Definitely was a bit weaker. Obviously, Xayah pairing wasn't as good, but Xayah being buffed has definitely helped him. He kind of sits as like a high A tier option. Good into the likes of Braum. That is definitely a matchup which can be a really solid, using Rakan as like an answer to Braum. can work into some of the other matchups, but definitely tends to be a bit more of a player preference, and a bit more synergy with something like a Twitch can definitely help. Yeah, he's a good A tier pick. Shaco, this is AP Shaco. You don't really see AD Shaco in the support role that much. AP Shaco is a really good pick. Definitely benefiting from a lot of the items at the moment. If the enemy team doesn't have good ways of disarming boxes, he's very oppressive to play against. Obviously, if you have to activate a box to break the box if you are playing a melee champion, unless you have some sort of skill which can obviously hit it from range, gives them really good Drake control, grub control if you're looking to like be a bit more proactive around the map. But overall, he's just in a solid spot as like an AP champion, and definitely something which can be considered as a good support. Next to him, I'm going to put Blitzcrank and Nautilus. So both these champions, obviously very popular at the moment, very good, just generic hook champions. Nautilus, for his point and click, can be really valuable. Not quite S tier in my opinion. I definitely think he has counters and like options into him. He's also a bit harder to, but obviously he does have the point and click, but he isn't easy to play by any means. If you mess up playing Nautilus, you can just sprint it down in games. But his itemization is pretty strong at the moment. He's definitely a high A tier pick. A lot of the champions which are abusing like these tanky Warmorgs options are definitely really performing quite well at the moment, as they are harder to punish than they used to be. But they're not suddenly easy or just instant win options, other than I'd argue Leona, who is incredibly strong at the moment, mostly because she did get buffed before the changes split, but she's just also relatively easy to play as well. Definitely really benefiting this champion at the moment. And then the other champions we have here, so we have Fresh, who I believe is a really underrated pick at the moment. With Aphelios being buffed next patch, I definitely do think we'll start seeing Fresh in competitive. Also someone who can run the likes of Warmorgs as a first item option, can give him a bit more upfront durability, and obviously the sustain and movement speed he does value. Zidium, under the radar these days. I mean, kind of rightfully so. But this champion is just really unpopular, and it can be quite difficult to really play with when you just don't play with a huge amount of Zillions. If the pick is also primarily just played by mains of the champion, like you don't really see like first time Zillions, unless they are kind of like new build variation or something. Right now it looks to be just primarily like a tanky variation where you are going like primarily just your W and E max, running the likes of Warmorgs, Guardian, being like this kind of unkillable champion, throwing out constant movement and slows, which can be quite oppressive in game. And yeah, he's a good A tier pick for that. And then my enchanter options are Milio and Soraka here. So Soraka definitely in a fine spot at the moment. Really valuable ultimate, really good healing. The likes of Moonstone, Redemption, Warmorgs, all three of these items are really solid on her at the moment, and puts her in a really good spot. In Milio's case, he's being changed in 14.14, but the champion's definitely doing quite well at the moment. Really oppressive level 1 with his E and passive. That is what they are primarily going after. On top of this, he has really solid itemization with like Echoes of Helia, Ardent, stuff like that. He tends to be a bit more synergy reliant than the likes of Soraka, but if you get the synergies, like you're playing with like Lucian, stuff like that, he can be really powerful and oppressive to play against, and he's a great A tier option. The other champion here is Zac. He wraps up the A tier. He can probably sit at the back of the A tier. I'll put him next to the Shen and Tom Kench. Bit weaker now, obviously he is a bit more reliant on level scaling, which definitely does hurt support primarily. Being weaker early on into the game does hurt here, as you're not getting access to the same amount of levels as you would in the top lane and the jungle. And yeah, he loses a bit of power, but he's not suddenly going from A tier to B tier. He kind of sits at the back end of the A tier. Moving on to the S tier, so we have a new addition, LeBlanc. Okay, so LeBlanc is a champion I talked about last patch. Like, I was aware of this pick's potential, but then it didn't really have any play rate, and it was kind of hard to really get a solid grasp on it without really looking over a bunch of games, seeing what it really provides, and like understanding the full functionality of it. But now that I've kind of had that opportunity, I've seen people play it in some of my games, the pick rates increased pretty heavily. Yeah, this pick's really strong. It's better than mid lane LeBlanc, in my opinion. It's you're not prohibited by the lack of wave clear, which LeBlanc mid is often prohibited by. nor do you have the same level of mana constraints. It allows you to just roam around a lot more. She received a lot of buffs towards her early game, which once again does help support, as you're not going to get as many levels. Her base damages are good, her ratios are good, and yeah, all these have just really enabled support LeBlanc to be a really good option. And if you're not comfortable playing it in the mid lane, then it gives you a good option in the support role. I wouldn't be surprised if down the line they do end up trying to push her back towards, like if this does pick up quite heavily, if they do try to push her back towards mid. But right now it's kind of hovering around the 10% mark of pick rate. But we'll have to see. Obviously, in its current state, I do think it is very strong. And if you do put the games in, there is definitely a high chance you could just gain some free LP out of this if you put the practice in. Don't first time it, obviously. That's just the same for like all champions of the game. But if you put some of the games in, yeah, she should take over. You do a lot of burst damage. You're incredibly volatile around the map. You have really good invades. And yeah, she is a great S tier option at the moment. Nami, once again, also in a really good spot. This pick really benefited from the buffs she received not too long ago. I'm honestly surprised they buffed Nami. The champion was performing quite well beforehand, but then they still went ahead and did it anyway. And her pairing's also really strong. She does pair quite nicely with like sort of Corki ADC. Obviously, Corki pretty weak at the moment for the average player. Is getting nerfed in 14.14. This is primarily for elite and competitive. Okay, so a lot of people don't seem to understand that Corki is incredibly early game skewed. Like the main prohibiting fact about this champion, and why I don't really recommend it, is because it tends to just lose games for the average player. Obviously, if you put the games in and you're like really understanding of why this pick is strong, primarily because of like certain pairings in the jungle, like your AP pairings or your tank pairings, combined with the wave clear, which can enable you to be really oppressive early on into the game, allowing for map roams, allowing for control over objectives, which you don't really see these traits typically in the average player. It could definitely be really punishing, and you will definitely lose games. Yeah, like once again, if you don't put the time in. And most people are very misconstrued and like think high elo is a correct representation of average play, which it really isn't. I would really recommend avoiding copying what high elo streamers are playing, unless the pick translates into something in average play. But that can definitely be a challenge, and maybe a topic for a different video, but those are just my opinions on Corki at the moment. I would recommend playing Tristana if you're looking for AD option, if you want something kind of representative of high elo, or in the case of just something easier to play, Neferi and Garen are my recommended AD options. I do think these picks are really good in the mid lane, and definitely something which could get you LP. It was having a bit of an easier time. I think that's the best way to describe it. Zyra and Brand are still really good AP options. Obviously, Zyra and Brand are being nerfed in 14.14. Brand did get nerfed this patch. It was very placebo. Didn't really do anything. But yeah, both these champions in a great spot at the moment. Great burn, dot mages, and have a lot of power. The other picks here are Sona. Sona gets a lot of flack. Obviously, people don't like playing in with enchanters, and if you pick Sona with a bad team comp, you will lose the game. But if you pick Sona, you have some level of front line, you have a good synergy in the bot lane, this pick can be really hard to ever break, and she is a good S tier option for that reason. Just don't blind this pick. It can get punished by certain champions, and it can be frustrating for certain ADCs to play with it. Zeref, also going to be my S tier. Obviously, my go-to artillery mage. I think this pick is really good in the support role at the moment. The changes towards Luden's companion have definitely helped this pick as well. It allows it to be a bit more upfront bursty. And overall, he's just in a good spot at the moment. A good S tier pick. Attack goes under the radar as a champion, but definitely a solid S tier option, especially if the correct pairings. The likes of Nyla obviously come to mind as being one of the stronger ones. And if you're picking him into heavy engage, where you can get value out of the ultimate, get value out of the E, have the correct synergies, he's a great S tier option. But once again, like Sona, you want to be careful where you pick this champion. They're not as freely pickable as some of the other picks here. Rel is a bit more freely pickable, but there's still answers to Rel. Obviously, the likes of Braum, it can be quite hard for Rel to play into. Janna, if they're good and like reactive, can also be quite punishing for this champion to play into. But she's still in a really good spot at the moment. Obviously, benefiting from Warmog's Rush. Great S tier pick. Jana, still in the S tier, obviously has been strong for a long time at this point. The W max is quite oppressive to play against, does a decent chunk of damage. On top of this, her Q is also a very valuable peeling tool, combined with the ultimate into a lot of the engage at the moment, can definitely have value. Obviously, if you're not reactive, you will get punished. Like, these champions do require fast reaction times to really make use of your kit. Combined with the E is a really valuable ability. People seem to really undervalue how strong Jana E is. The AD steroid is really powerful, and if you can get like a champion, if you're paired with a champion which really values heavy amounts of AD, there is a lot of power hidden within that ability which people just don't recognize as much. The other two picks here are Braum and Poppy. So Poppy, I'm actually going to swap on with Leona, who is going to be my solo S plus option at the moment. Braum is a great response into a lot of the considered meta picks at the moment, or just a lot of the popular picks. Your Nautiluses, your Leonas, your Freshes, stuff like that, Rails as well. He can really easily respond to these champions. He is great anti-engage. Obviously, he's punished by enchanters. It's why I don't recommend blinding Braum, but he is in a very good spot at the moment. Poppy, obviously, still really good at the moment. This is primarily just your Halo Blades, Blood Song, playing around your upfront damage, going things like Deadmans into Swifties and just running around the map, being obnoxious and just causing havoc. That is what a lot of this champion does, and she's really good at the moment. Definitely something I'd recommend playing if you like this kind of pick. And then Leona, obviously Leona has definitely picked up as being the primary support this patch. I believe she is shot up as like the most picked support in high and just average play. Maybe not average play. I believe Lux still holds that spot. Actually, it might not even be Leona by second slot. I might just be lying out my ass here. Oh no, it is Leona second spot. I'm right. But yeah, Lux is still obviously going to be the most popular champion. But yeah, Leona shot up in play rate in every elo bracket. Really benefiting from the items at the moment, the Warmogs, the Blood Song, the runes obviously still pretty standard. It's just your Aftershock. And yeah, the buffs combined with all these changes have really elevated her into a really strong spot at the moment. Obviously, if you're playing with like a passive ADC, you will struggle a bit more, but there is accessibility in roaming. That is definitely something you can get, you can kind of alleviate a bad lane with. And yeah, the pick's in a great spot at the moment. The itemization, like I said, really good. And those are my thoughts. So thank you guys for watching. I will see you in the next one. Let me know down below if you want to see high elo tier lists. Like I'm pretty sure I will do them at this point. I've definitely seen a lot of people kind of asking, but whether that's just out of frustration of not seeing them, or whether that's like actually wanting to see them, I'm kind of like on the fence about. But it's definitely something I'm leaning towards at the moment, and something I am going to consider for 14.14. Yeah, see ya.